Okay, let's start our talk on humility with a short story. There once was a fisherman who was a very pious Christian his whole life. One day, while out fishing, he fell over the side of the boat while the boat continued to drive away without him. While floating helpless in the ocean, a boat came to him to offer help, but he replied, "No thanks, God will save me." A second and a third boat came and went after offering help, but he continued to reply, "Thanks, I don't need your help. God will save me." Well, the man eventually drowned, and when he went before the judgment seat of Christ, he said, "Christ, I've been a Christian all of my life. Why did you not help me when I needed you the most?" God then replied, "Did you not see, my child? I came to you 3 times." So the subject of humility is so central to Orthodox Christianity that I would say it supersedes almost all other forms of learning. In fact, you could know every chapter and verse in the Bible and all of the doctrine and theology that the church has to offer and still not be nearly as enlightened as the person who has true humility. I opened with this story because it presents a theological framework for how even the greatest people can get deluded by pride. In this case, the fisherman, who was by all rights a good and pious man, he allowed his spiritual pride to obscure God's desire to save him. The saints tell us that humility is the foundation of all virtues. And St. Isaac the Syrian once said, "A man who has humility in his heart is greater than the man who raises the dead by his prayer. For he who raises the dead is a debtor to God, but the humble man has made God his debtor." Think about how bold that statement is coming from a saint. But why is this? Sometimes when we think of humility, we think of not accepting praise where it is due, or alternatively, accepting scorn where it is not due. But to think of it in these terms only would indeed be very short-sighted. We see that humility is the opposite of pride, and pride is actually the opening gateway to every type of sin. When we practice humility, we're employing our best defense to avoid sin, and at the same time we're appealing to God to let His will be done. Even Jesus Christ Himself, the Lord of all creation, bent low to wash the feet of His disciples. Imagine, Christ could have ruled from the loftiest throne on earth, but He chose humility in every circumstance of His earthly life. St. John Climacus writes, "Humility is the robe of divinity. Whoever wears it is truly imitating Christ." The theology behind this chief virtue of the saints is that humility is the spiritual equivalent of saying to God, "Let your will be done, not mine." You're in effect suppressing your natural or earthly inclination towards pride and offering yourself to the will of God. An example of this in everyday life would be to think about if you have an argument with someone and that person lowered their head and sincerely said to you, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." Well, rather than continue to attack them, something spiritual might move within you to want to try and comfort that person as a result of their humility or contrition. Likewise, when you offer an apology to someone else, many times it feels like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. There are, of course, lots of exceptions to this type of scenario, but you get the idea. If you search Orthodox topics on YouTube, for example, you'll see some very spiritually gifted priests and ascetics who address various topics. But one thing common to most of them is that they all exude a very high level of humility. They attribute none of their wisdom to themselves. In the small Compline prayers, we say a verse that says, "Let them be turned back because of their shame who say to me, 'Well done, well done.'" Praise, although it feels natural to desire it, moves us out of a spiritual condition where God can move within us. St. Gregory of Nyssa says, "As rain softens the hardened earth, humility softens the heart. Humility is the guardian of love and the dwelling place of God." This state of mind and these examples of humility are pervasive throughout the Bible. When the self-righteous Pharisee went to the temple to pray, he said, "Thank you, God, I'm not like these sinners." And at the same time, a tax collector standing at the back of the church wouldn't even lift his head to heaven, and he said, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." Jesus went on to say that the tax collector went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. It can seem very strange to a new convert, but you'll notice in your journey through Orthodoxy that the most spiritually gifted people we have are the ones that are by far the most humble. Oh.